welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Ioana from Mirror Interpretation Todorova, and this is class number 2. Today we are going to talk about interpretation modes. We have 4 main interpretation modes, but before I start, I will repeat again. Interpreter is a person who renders vocally the meaning of one message to another with the main goal to facilitate the communication between two parties that speak different languages. The first mode of interpretation is consecutive. In consecutive interpretation, the interpreter starts speaking after the first or the provider pause. So provider can speak few phrases and pause and give a space to the interpreter to render the message. So this also is known as a pause interpretation because the speaker will pause and wait for the interpreter. Consecutive, why? Because it goes in sequences. So the provider will speak, render a message, ask a question, and the interpreter will render it. Let's give an example. Let's say this is a doctor's appointment, and the doctor say, "Hello, I'm Dr. Kurt. Nice to meet you. Can you tell me what's the level of your pain from 1 to 10 on the scale from 1 to 10? The doctor paused, and now let's imagine that this is Italian language. The Italian interpreter said, "Salve, buongiorno, mi chiamo Dr. Kurt. Potresti dirmi alla scala da 0 a 10 qual è il livello del tuo dolore?" 0 point. No? So interpreter have time to render the message because the provider will pause and give that space. The consecutive interpretation mode is very well used in medical. In medical field, this is the best way to interpret. Consecutive interpreting also is used sometimes in legal and could be used in business meeting as well, or interpreting in conference in the base of if it's something like we're signing a contract and they are clarifying the points of a contract and use an interpreter just orally explain it. It could be also used there, but normally in businesses use simultaneous. So let's go ahead with second mode of interpreting, simultaneous. Simultaneous mode of interpretation is when the interpreters speak while the main speaker speak together or with few seconds of delay. The simultaneous interpreting mode is used a lot in legal and business and conference, especially business to business when you interpret in a trade fair or meetings there, one-to-one businessmen or one company representative against another or with another, that they're trying to help each other in a business field. This is when you use simultaneous. Simultaneous is not that precise. An interpreter could eventually will omit something or part of the message, but the interpreter have to focus on the meaning here. And normally when I do simultaneous, and if there is a numbers or something, I will always have a small note with me where I'm gonna just type down a number or word or term that I'm gonna make sure to render in order to give a better performance. Side translation, you see here it says translation, and as we talk, translation is writing from one language to another. A side translation, it's when an interpreter receives a piece of paper. Let's say we are going to a doctor's office and we have to interpret for somebody, and they need to fill a questionnaire, and you receive a questionnaire in a piece of paper, and the limited English speaking patient have to fill this questionnaire. So what the interpreter does, interpreter going to read, let's say it's from English to Russian, you're gonna read the question in English, you're gonna orally present it to another language. In this case, let's say it's Russian, you're gonna ask the question to the patient in Russian, and the patient will answer normally with yes or no. The patient itself have to write the answer. Use an interpreter. You're not allowed to fool the answers writing for them. They have to choose it and write it down. You're there only to speak, only to interpret. The second, okay, and so the side translation is used sometimes in medical or legal where it's necessary to fill a questionnaire or let's say sign a document or permission. For example, that normally the doctors will have the paper and they're gonna read it to the patient. If it's, let's say, permission for some kind of a procedure, the doctor will read it, will explain the procedure, and then will ask the patient to sign the documents, right? So you just gonna speak, but I'm just letting you know, as a professional, as an interpreter, you should know that you're not allowed to write any notes for the lab. No writing for the interpreter. And the last interpretation mode is summarization. This mode you're gonna use rarely. I don't want to say never, but really you're not gonna use that mode very much. The summarization is used when you have a group of people speaking or discussing or trying to decide on a problem. Let's say the doctors have a board meeting with the family trying to decide on a life-saving procedure. When the family members discuss about decision or argue or something, you as an interpreter normally are not asked to interpret everything. Sometimes you're just asked to communicate the final decision because they will discuss between them and then decide and say, hey, okay, interpreter, we decided, and please state to the doctor that we decide that. Interpreter is gonna start with summarization, saying interpreter speaking, interpreter summarizing, the family member discuss the matter and arrive to the decision, quote, direct interpretation, and then you're gonna render the message exactly. So when you summarize, you can say disagreements, who disagree, what disagree, very briefly, summarization briefly to the main points, and then render the end of the message. Okay guys, that was from me. That was regarding second class regarding interpretation modes. Keep staying tuned. You're gonna receive more information here regarding how to be more professional as an interpreter. Thank you for being on my YouTube channel. That was Ioana from Mirror Interpretation Todorova. I wish you a wonderful day. Bye bye.